Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast here on the E2KG network. This is episode number 192. Every time I say this, gentlemen, I keep having to stop myself and think, wow, we have been at this. And hopefully, we will still keep at this. But tonight, we have the ability to dive into the last 2 weeks of news and game industry analysis on our deep dive episodes. Every other week here on the E2KG network, we come with a deep dive news and analysis episode. And in those off weeks, or actually in the playful weeks, we have a little bit of our playlist and what we've been playing. So tonight, it is our time to analyze the news. And actually, I have all of our E2KG hosts here with me tonight. So, oh, look at that. There you go, Tao. We're doing a little bit of Four Horsemen there. Yep, that is good. Tao Master 99, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Woo! All right. So, and Swissguard, how are you?
Good.
That really, wow.
You-
Selling it there.
You must be like Oli or Arn Anderson. One of
We're
them, 'cause they were,
trying to
like,
put you
quiet.
over here, and you just come at it. Where's your mic practice? How did you get?
How'd I get on the show?
That's well.
That's a good question.
I didn't say that. I was gonna say, how'd you get out of the factory? But but you've got a lot going on, sir. You have plenty of movement going on in your life, and
Yeah.
so we are glad that you are here to take some time with us, and maybe give you a little bit of normalcy as
No,
your
it's good.
background will
I'm
be
excited.
changing. So
Yeah. This might be the last episode from this venue. So it is nice to get away and talk gaming. So I thank you, gentlemen.
excellent, very much. And working the boards over here is Game Logic. Are you ready to talk, sir? Can we interrupt your work, or otherwise we'll come back around to you because there's plenty going on.
Nope, I am still here. The heck did I just see? Cosmic Red DualSense for the PlayStation 5 is as of moments ago, or maybe earlier today, is now
It
available
was
for
announced
pre-order.
this afternoon. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, and a black one as well. So
Breaking
if you-
news! Breaking
If
news!
you need to, pause this podcast to go get your Cosmic Red DualSense,
He's trying to grab one. That's why he's quiet.
that is actually probably true.
Well, what I really needed to say is, first of all, congratulations, gentlemen. I am very impressed. Probably the best episode of the GX show that I listened to that you all did last week. And I also wanted to notify you that my lawyer will be in touch with each of you for my defamation lawsuit.
Oh,
I'm
good.
trying to
Well,
remember what we said.
yeah, probably not as much as the lawyers and the judges on the EA or the Apple and Epic
Well,
case.
a very interesting thing, as we'll discuss tonight. For instance, you guys think that I hate Nintendo, but we'll let their financial news speak for itself.
I don't know that we've ever said that you hate Nintendo.
Perhaps not in
Might
those
have said that.
exact words, but
You
defamation
may
is a slippery
be,
slope.
you may have a certain disposition one way or the other, but I do not want to, I would.
We can discuss Nintendo news when I'm on the show. It doesn't only have to be on episodes that I'm off.
Well, that's good because in this past week we will have some news to talk about here, some big numbers. But before we get to Nintendo news about consoles, I want to talk a quick minute about my console hunt. Thanks to Xbox's new announcement of their pilot purchase program, all I need to do is enter in a lottery on Xbox Insider and hope maybe I'll get the chance to buy one. And actually, when you enter in, you do have to. You're not committed to purchasing it, but you have to agree that you will strongly consider purchasing it
Well,
before buying.
when you put it
Well-
that way, it doesn't sound nearly as exciting as the news read itself.
So tell us about the news read. Go ahead.
Oh no, this was when I was not all riled up and prepared to brief. But it was really it's only constituted in a tweet, and I think that's the thing that was most pertinent to me. And so there was an announcement made that those who were members of the Xbox Insider Program, which is a program that you can sign up for that ties you into certain things. And Tao, you might be a member. I am deliberately not. DBQ, you might be. This is one of these things where beta versions of the operating system updates are essentially pushed to you, which is one of the reasons why I'm not registered in the program, because I don't want to test their software. If I had a spare Xbox, for instance, maybe I would, but I definitely just never wanted to be part of that. And then, so in similar vein, maybe to kind of PlayStation's approach, where you were allowed to sign up for a PlayStation 5, and what we believe, what we speculate on is that somewhere in the background there's some Sony human being doing some type of loyalty assessment for the people who signed up as to who got into the queue. But the point is that you sign up for this thing based on a minimal criteria to register, which is that you're in the insider program. And then once you do that, you really don't have any idea of what the criteria is beyond that by which they use to select people. And of course, again, in order to go that route, you have to put yourself in a pool that allows, as I said, beta updates of the operating system pushed to you. Are you required to take those, or do you get a
No.
choice as
So
they
that's what I
incrementally
was
come out?
just. That
Okay.
is the face that I was making. Is as someone who had to re-download the Insider app because I had the old one and hadn't used it since probably the last beta that I tried. Uh, you don't have to opt. I mean, it is all opt-in. Like it pops up with a number of activities that you could do, a number of opportunities, but those are all opt-in. And so in this case with this, I mean, in addition to the tweet and the news stories that picked it up, it was on my dashboard the night of that news story as well. So I saw it there featured in one of the tiles. So I mean, I think that that's in some ways that makes sense that it's a relatively minor advertisement for it because it is designed to be people already within that infrastructure. And some, same way with that Sony, the pre PS5 kind of lottery launch that they did, or the sign up to purchase, that you were referencing. So, yeah, it is. I had to answer two questions in order to kind of opt in, and it was really just about my interest level and ability to purchase. That which is there a specific council, and if I was offered the opportunity, how likely would I be to purchase it?
So
So
one of the things I thought was interesting is the Windows Central article gave Microsoft credit, and I kind of agree with this sentiment for doing something, from a positive control perspective of, fighting off like the scalpers and the botnets, or the bots, that are grabbing all these things up. But then, so that's maybe part of the pool. The other part, though, that I feel about it is because you posted in the news slate. It's not on tonight's show, but the recent announcement from Nvidia of new crops of RTX laptops that will have their 3050 and 3050 Ti GPUs in them. And my problem with Nvidia, and lots of other people who are making these announcements, I'm like, don't bother me with announcements of things that I can't buy, right? Because they're so scarcely available. Like, there aren't going to be any 3050 RTX, Ti laptops around for anybody. Like, except a very obscure amounts. And so, kind of this thing, like the number of people that will be able to take advantage of this and that will be rewarded, assuming that, and this is the problem, right? People have things to do with $500 rather than just let it sit around potentially. And so, for a large part of America, which unfortunately, whether people choose to admit it or not, lives paycheck to paycheck, the notion that you'll have that $500 sitting around ready to be tapped for an Xbox Series X purchase at the random moment in time that they may reach out to you is just another kind of, element in the mix that makes it dubious as to whether or not this is going to put a dent in it at all.
well, the idea of putting a dent in it when we don't even know what level of inventory that they're going to be offering within this program. I mean, the kind of sentiment behind it of rewarding those or providing opportunities to those who are already in the infrastructure makes a whole lot of sense. But there's no even statement about how many councils are being reserved for this program or anything else like that. So, in the same week, or same news cycle, a week that we get the announcement that PlayStation 5 is going to be supply constrained into 2022. I think that this is where yeah, between the NVIDIA chips and new consoles are hard to come by. And in Nintendo's case, consoles are hard to come by because they are selling at record sales. So yes, game logic, let's jump from this news story into something a little more meaty because this is a E2KG podcast. We do need to talk about some fiscal numbers here. And Nintendo had a nice, big, meaty. Wow, it was the end of the fiscal year. So we got not only in this news cycle have we had Nintendo, we had EA, we've had Activision, we've had Ubisoft. Tonight we're going to spend most of our time on the news around Nintendo and Ubisoft with a couple other splices, blah, blah, blah. How about that? I am two financial news in. I'm looking at numbers as I'm trying to talk, gentlemen. So let's talk about those numbers. Or
And it is
game
the
we
season. It is the season of the Splicer, which I think is what.
that is probably what it is. Yes, you are right. See, I logged in Tuesday for my season of the Splicer. Okay. Anyhow, that is our obligatory Destiny 2 talk, so we will be moving on. Nintendo sold record sales, right? We are talking out that their operating profits rose 82% year on year. And again, in 2020, everything was up. And Nintendo actually acknowledges this, that they've reduced their, well, I don't know that they've reduced their projections, but they are aiming their sales this year conservatively, that they are not anticipating that they will top last year and that they have adjusted their sales numbers accordingly with the idea that there will be some drop off after the global pandemic allows supply chains and people and all kinds of other things to get back into what was a previous routine. But even then, they've had investors translated in the call who were asking that they're saying that they thought their projections were too conservative. So, to just run down some numbers here, we get that they sold 28.8 million Switches last year, 37% up from the year before, which means that the Switch has now sold about 84.59 million units.
And is this
yeah.
the fourth or fifth year?
So this is year 4 because it came out in March of 2017.
2017. Well, this is year 5, right? So we just completed the 4th year.
Yes, we have just finished. We have in full 4 years, and we're starting in the 5th fiscal year. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
I thought the interesting thing about this number was that is twice. It's in year 4. That's twice the number of units that they moved in the year of release, where I think they moved about 14 million units. Pretty.
Well, and I think that's a good comparison because there was supply demand. I mean, there's supply chain pieces there in terms of getting stuff into the channel. Yes, I think that is. I think that is a great example there. It puts them on a trajectory that has the Switch well outselling the Wii. It is moving into the PlayStation 1 era in terms of sales figures. It has surpassed the GBA, and that includes the GBA sales numbers include all the different iterations of the GBA. So as a few weeks ago, as Sony was touting that the PlayStation 5 is the fastest selling, that Nintendo is also coming in with strong sales as well. Those strong sales are their operating profit. So we talked about net sales being up. Operating profit is 82%, 81.8. And the net profit, so profits after deductions, are actually even higher, that they're an 85.7% increase year over year. And this is, I think it wasn't a surprise that Nintendo did well. I think the numbers are relatively a little higher than people might have expected. There's a lot there. Their forecasts were strong. I think the other piece here is that we get also sales numbers for Nintendo games, for Switch games, which gives you, and we had talked about this months ago on another E2KG, another Enough to Keep Going podcast, in terms of Animal Crossing New Horizon selling 10 million within the first month, within the first few weeks of, because when they had last year's fiscal numbers, we knew how much they sold there, and now Animal Crossing New Horizons has sold 32.6 million, just a little behind Mario Kart Deluxe at 35. And when you add Mario Kart Deluxe or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with Mario Kart 8 from the Wii U, you're up above sales numbers into, you're creeping into the, and actually you're matching in that 50 million range, which gets them into where things like Mario Kart Wii were as well. I think one of the other things that ties in with some of the other news of the week in terms of Nintendo related news and rumors is Mario Party, which just got their online upgrade at years after, has been selling strong and is at 14. It's number 7 of the top 10 with almost about 15 million. So a lot of Nintendo related news here, gentlemen. I can tell you that I don't know if I've raised my son right or if he's going to be a complete mess. But last night, before going to bed, we sat down and looked over Nintendo game sales numbers and had a discussion over different franchises. So, you know, he's getting ready to graduate high school, and he's now gone from drawing Mario Kart tracks in his driveway to looking at financial numbers. So I'll take that as a parental win. But I know that Nintendo will take these numbers as a corporate win. Gentlemen, thoughts, observations here?
Hey, I guess I wanted to ask Swiss and Tao, do you guys think that the inclusion of the Switch Lite numbers paint the total Switch sales with a questionable stripe? Is kind of my question.
Yeah, I was looking at that while he was talking, and it's just about half, maybe a little bit over half the sales for the whole thing. Um, and yeah, and I was kind of thinking, I mean that's kind of cheating a little, I guess.
Well,
But I
because
mean,
in years
if you
past,
think of it,
those would have been 3DS numbers, right?
yeah, probably, most likely, yeah. But I mean, I guess it's still Switch. I mean, it still does. I mean, I mean, you can still play most of the games, at least not all of them, obviously, because you can't detach the controller. But and actually, well, I guess you could still play Mario Party because um, there's certain things that you kind of have to do with that game. I think with the Joy Cons maybe separated. I can't remember. It's been a while since I played it, but I think the majority of these games you could still play on the light. So I mean, I guess if you think it as a family, I guess sure they hit that number. I mean, if you, I mean, I know Xbox doesn't release numbers as far as sold and stuff like that, but they're always saying how everything's doing so great on the Xbox One family or Xbox Series family of systems. So I think everybody kind of does that. So I mean, not to try to give them a pass, but I mean, like I said, everyone's doing it. So I don't know if it's really a big deal. And they released that what 2 years, two and a
I think
half
2000.
after
Yeah,
the original one.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's fall of
So
19.
yeah. Don't worry, we'll see the pro numbers, the Switch Pro numbers next year. So that'll just double everything probably.
Yeah,
So Swiss.
I'm not worried about it that much either. Like I look at it as a Switch. It's a cruddy Switch, but it's a Switch.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the people buying it are looking at it as a Switch. It's just people like us have more sophisticated gaming palettes.
The one other thing I wanted to kind of dig into is because this is the crisis for me. While you guys drag my name through the mud on the episodes that I'm not on, feeling that I think
We're not gonna live that one down for a while.
I,
Because of what we're talking about.
well, because if it's not full on vitriol and hate, I have to assume that at least it's a reference to me being perhaps apathetic or tepid on the notion of the Switch, and I will say that the number of the titles and the number of titles that exceed the 1 million mark are an impetus to that notion, if that notion is true. Of course, as I mentioned before, I use my Nintendo Switch to play lots of non-Nintendo games. It's the point of it is to have a portable system that allows me access to a lot of titles that keep me from having to either play on a mobile device like a phone, or slug a gaming laptop with me on travel. And here we are yet again in the 5th year of a Nintendo platform, and we have what is it, 22 of the 36 titles that exceeded 1 million are first party, leaving 14 titles for the third party people, right? And we have things like EA having said in the past that they weren't super interested in focusing on releasing a lot of titles on the Nintendo Switch, which is unfortunate when you look at some of the moves that EA is making, like Super Mega Baseball, for instance. um, would play excellently on this platform on the go. Would be a great thing to have. But and this will get worse, is what we've seen throughout history. You will get an increasing majority and percentage of Nintendo first party titles that become the ones that are highest performing and most lucrative, at an imbalance, I think, in comparison to Xbox or PlayStation, where maybe there's a little more parity and the third party publishers feel like they have a little more of a chance. You look at how well a Call of Duty performs, right, on the other platforms, for instance. So I just wanted to kind of get your guys' take on that.
I think that what the highest selling. I was looking at the numbers last night. I thought there were more than of the top 25. I thought there were more Nintendos there than third parties. Really, the one third party that stuck out to me was Mario plus Rabbids. And I mean, I guess I'm counting things like a Xenoblade or things that are kind of second party titles. Is there a third party title that sold more than Mario plus Rabbids, which already is a Mario game but developed by Ubisoft?
I mean, not that I know of off the top of my head, and not that I would. Nothing that comes to mind that would even cause me to be like motivated to do a Google to see if that were even a possibility.
Monster Hunter Rise is already at 6 million.
Yeah, right. And that was a March release.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a Capcom title.
So, yep.
So the thing with Monster Hunter Rise, so like I'd say Monster Hunter Rise right now, like I'm just looking at Wikipedia and seeing what the top selling Switch games are. Like that's like the one exception. And Among Us is number 19. Like that tells you like what's up there. But that's one of the only games that I feel like a third party has like developed specifically for the Switch. They took their franchise and made an iteration of it, but it feels like everyone else is like looking at the landscape as a whole, and just given the hardware and everything, the Switch is its own little thing. So it's hard, I think, for companies to just want to invest in it. Maybe I'm naive about it, them seeing competition in Nintendo first parties. I don't know if that would intimidate them. I just think that the hardware just doesn't, they have to build around the Switch, and that's not necessarily something like that maybe they're willing to do. I just, they see what you can get on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 5. It doesn't take a lot to develop for that spectrum of hardware. It takes a little bit more effort to target it toward the Switch. So
Yeah, because you have 3 platforms now that are all x86.
yeah,
Your software release train, right, is all the same, right? So, but I think even more than that, I think, Swiss, there's truth to what you mentioned, right? And this is the unfortunate problem that we've had over and over and over again, is like, if you're a third party publisher, your most feared competition on this platform is the manufacturer, right? You're not worried about what everybody else is doing. Your biggest competitor, the hill you have to get over, is how your title is going to do up against a Mario or a Zelda title. And I think this is where we see just a lot of them fall out of the loop, and they just, particularly as the life cycle goes on, they just go, wow, PlayStation and Microsoft just released new hardware. I got new GPUs having landed on NVIDIA. I'm going to wire all my software development infrastructure around those common platforms and spend less time on this thing where I have to fight all the big, literally the biggest mascots on the gaming landscape.
Well, and I think, I mean, that's historically the case as well. Like as a company, what you're talking about is a sound corporate move, is a sound investment move. Like, why fight against the platform holder when since 1996, within, for the last 3, 4 generations of consoles, that has been the case, that Nintendo's titles have sold the most. So it's not a surprise to me. I think it always has limited the scope of what modern Nintendo consoles can do. And I think the counterpoint to that is that Nintendo's okay with that because of the first part of this story in terms of the revenues. Like, so what? Look at what we're making. We're okay.
I'm not sure if, I guess, like, how upset should I be that these third parties are coming on? I guess that's what really, I kind of probably take a little bit more of a Nintendo perspective on it. Like, I'm not that worried that I don't have some of the other, some of the variety on it, but maybe I've just been so trained to just like, this is where I get my Nintendo fix. Um, looking down the list, there's not a lot there that's non-Nintendo or second party. Like Astral Chain is like number 41 with a little over 1 million units. So that's a third party title that showed up over 1 million units. But looking at it, um, you got to think though, like I think what you said, Agasicles, you're right. Like, would Platinum Games have made more money putting that on the PlayStation and the Xbox and the PC? Like looking at like what like the Near franchise has done or something.
Yeah,
And like why limit yourself? I don't know. I
yeah,
can see both sides of it, so I'm not too.
and it's definitely a matter of what kind of gamer you are, right? And I thought, one of the reasons why I liked last week's episode so much was because you guys talk about the thing that is near and dear to my heart, which is, trying to figure out, what you are as a gamer, and you know, and as you go through that evolution, right? And this is one of those things where, for me, on these Nintendo platforms, it has so often been, and I was this is why it hurts me so badly when you guys talk about me, about my feelings about Nintendo. I was there on day one with the Nintendo Switch. I was waving the Nintendo pom poms, rolling up to release. I was one of the ones who was fighting people on Twitter and all the naysayers who were saying the Switch isn't going to work. It's a novelty. Nobody wants to play those old games, right? I was there saying, no, you need to look at the Nvidia Shield hardware platform, right? And so, but
You were on board. I mean,
yeah,
you were an advocate because you knew the technology.
yeah, but this is kind of going the same way as the Wii, right? But there's always a horizon in that life cycle for me as a gamer on that Nintendo platform, where when the third party starts to nosedive, I just go, well, if the only other thing coming out on the platform are the big, I'm not going to keep that as part of my environment and ecosystem for the one release every, 18 months that I might be interested in. So it's just interesting angle, that's all.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, we are appreciative of your analysis and your opinions. So it may just be that it's an easy punching bag that when you were gone. So when I'm gone next, feel free to whack away. Um,
I am, of course, joking about that, so feel free
One
aw.
to.
one last one last thing. So one of the interest, like looking at this list of games, um, Octopath Traveler, which is a game near and dear to my heart, um, is in number 35. So it sold 1.5 million copies on the Switch, but that is one game that made the leap from the Switch to other platforms. And but again, that's like a very niche like title. Like it's a very niche style. So it probably doesn't have broad appeal beyond the platform anyway.
but,
But
but I think that was an effective rollout strategy, because I feel like it was maybe risky to deploy that on other platforms when there wasn't kind of a groundswell of support. And I feel like it kind of deployed and approved itself on the Switch, and that's why it was kind of a known entity when it rolled on to PC and other platforms. So that was one instance where I thought deploying on the Switch was the right thing to do, because it made their eventual transition to those other platforms even more effective.
They definitely designed it as like a throwback to that SNES era, so it made sense from that perspective.
Any other thoughts about Nintendo here, gentlemen? Are there sales numbers? Any other analysis? Otherwise, let's go on to our next story. So we were talking about Ubisoft as somebody on board with Nintendo early on, somebody, a developer who has one of those high sales figures games within the Switch in terms of Mario and Rabbids. But we also had Ubisoft's financial calls, and I don't know that we're going to talk so much about Ubisoft's financials, which were again strong because of the year, but we get a couple of things in here, both over the last 2 weeks. Now we've had some Ubisoft news in terms of financials, in terms of where they're looking to develop, where they're investing their resources. And so first, before we talk about where they're investing their resources, let's just take a moment, take a deep breath, and acknowledge that Skull and Bones has again been delayed. But not only Skull and Bones, but also, and Tao, you're going to have to help me out here, but what's the downhill racing game that one also is now mentioned here as well, the kind of spiritual riders.
Riders Republic.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Which both of those games are now into fiscal year 20 or into calendar year 22. Thoughts here, gentlemen, on either Riders Republic or Skull and Bones?
Let's go ahead, Tao.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I didn't realize that Riders Republic was delayed once again because I know they had already delayed it. Well, I don't think they had said when. Maybe.
I think that's correct. They haven't necessarily. They didn't have a date attached to it officially, and so
yeah, it's supposed to be spring, I think, originally this year, and then they said, "Oh, we're going to delay it until maybe later on." I think they might have just said later on in the year or something like that. But yeah, I don't think there's any given date. But yeah, that one kind of hurts just because that one looked pretty good. Excuse me. And Skull and Bones, I just keep forgetting about that game, to be honest with you, until it pops up in the news again, being delayed, it seems like. And I didn't realize this is 4 straight years now it's being delayed, at least according to that article, the video game chronicle article. So I didn't realize it was like, I thought it was only like a couple of years now, but I guess it's been a lot longer.
So I remember the E3 when Skull and Bones was announced, and I think I remember, Gascles, that like I think you were pretty excited about this at that E3. I think both of us thought it was pretty cool. And I remember thinking at the time, because I don't know if that year Microsoft did their thing like first, like they were the first group to go. And that was when Rare put out, what's their pirate game?
Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves, right. They announced that, and it's like, oh, that's kind of neat. And then like a day or two later, like Ubisoft comes out with Skull and Bones, and it's like look grittier and everything, like the Assassin's Creed realistic. I'm like, oh wow, that looks kind of more intense than Sea of Thieves. That's unfortunate for Rare to have to go like, two pirate game. And then now look at it. I mean, I think Sea of Thieves has been successful. They're still releasing updates and everything, and Skull and Bones is vaporware. But some of the details. I think DB, you found this article on Video Games Chronicle, and some of the details in it like interested me as a developer. So last year when they delayed it, it was because they were going to pivot from like just the major like AAA experience to like a live service, I think was like the talk. And then now there was this little tidbit. VGC was told the title will now feature a persistent game world with quests, characters, and storylines that will drastically evolve and change over time based on the collective actions of the community. Yada yada. One person with knowledge of its development said the social and quote live storytelling elements of Epic's Fortnite had been a strong inspiration for Skull and Bones' new direction. And all I can think is scope creep. Like that's all I'm seeing. It's like there's no it does not sound like they have somebody that says, you know what, this is what we are, this is what we need to be, and just release it. And I'm having like flashbacks to a post-mortem for it might have been one of like the old Duke Nukem games or something, but like literally like they kept seeing other games release and they're like, "Oh, we should do that. We can do it better." And then they'd pivot and then the game was just like vaporware for years. And it's just like, why just put it out there. I don't know. I don't get good feelings hearing stuff like that.
So I think that perspective is fair. Um, and this was one of the other reasons I was going to file a defamation lawsuit. I think you guys started this in the I was about to say the Slack channel in the Discord before we even got into the show. But um, so I'm my perspective, just to throw out some things to table set a slightly different perspective. Um, they had a huge shift in creative leadership last year. So last year also was remember well, even going back, it started the year before that, but was still like the fallout of the big upheaval about all of the toxic leadership and misogyny that infected the upper ranks at Ubisoft. And so the creative director for this project, who I believe had been on this project since Assassin's Creed Black Flag, so worked on the naval combat module within Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and then I think was part of the um, championing of taking that piece of the engine and converting it into its own game. And
That's a
so
lineage I remember as well.
yeah,
Yep.
and then had grown this team, and then all of a sudden he was yanked, right? Was asked politely to leave the company because of the investigations into his misconduct. So I think while I agree that in general I am normally against scope creep, I think this is an instance where Ubisoft is deploying something significantly different, and they have had the opportunity. Like, and they're not. I don't think that they're only chasing optimal things that they want to go after, but I also think that they're seeing some things dying on the vine. Most poignantly of which I think of Dreadnought, which is a very kind of similar to game in a space age setting, in terms of ship combat. Um, but that game launched and has nosedived. So I think part of it is the creative change. Um, the new director coming in, who's also a veteran, who, having read some of her comments, I think has a pretty strong feeling about what she's trying to create. The other thing is, what's an acceptable investment tail, right? If we reverse the concept of the O&M tail that typically follows software out after deployment. And this is a thing where, okay, you're going to do a live service game, right? Microtransactions, huge profitability, right? It may warrant putting that additional time and polish on a game if it's going to kind of move in slightly in a direction. I think it's important to kind of get it right. So I'm still excited about this game. I'm okay with the delay. Um, I want them to launch and get it right. And it sounds to me, what I'm excited about is it sounds like a little bit more. It's a derivative, and so that's a knock on it. But it sounds a little bit more like a Destiny-like, right? It's the notion of let's put a story out there. Let's have people participate in the story. Number one, the thing that probably jazzes me most about any game is the notion of persistence. And the way that I read the description, it sounds to me like lines and spheres of influence are going to move and territories are going to move, and that's going to remain persistent. So there may be factions or gangs or kind of Red Dead Redemption's equivalent of a fleet or posse, and as you control territories or whatever, that may move and shift, and that creates kind of that thing that you get in Eve Online, where players start driving where the story goes because they band together and make choices of their own on how to impact the universe. So I'm still pretty excited, and I'm fine with them taking their time to get it right. I acknowledge that it's probably a huge change over and somebody coming in, and although they haven't said it, I also, again, as you mentioned, Swiss, from a software development perspective, I'm almost absolutely certain that they have to have either gone to another engine or just have heavily modified the one that they were on. There's no way in the world they're still on the Assassin's Creed Black Flag engine. Assassin's Creed itself has moved on to new iterations of that software framework. So Yeah, take your time. It's gonna be a potential big moneymaker. It sounds a little bit now today. It sounds a little bit more like World of Warships mixed with a little Destiny, maybe mixed with a little Anthem and Sea of Thieves. So, uh, yeah, we'll see how it goes. And at the end of the day, it's probably going to be free to play. So,
Mhm.
no skin off my bones if it doesn't come out good, because then we won't necessarily have paid for it.
Yeah, let's take that free to pay segue here because that is also what Ubisoft has been talking about over the last week. Is that they are looking to invest more into free to play experiences. You had a story from earlier this week where they were talking about that they are looking to dive in to they're looking to I'm looking for the exact quote here because it not only did you get the free to play investment story on in an evening, but by the time the next day's news cycle has come out, you also get a follow-up story that then talks about how they're not abandoning triple A's. It's that they're looking to invest into more free to play experiences on top of their existing triple A franchises. So, and this is, they do name their premium experiences. Uh, Far Cry 6, Rainbow Six, Riders Republic, Skull and Bones. I think the way that we're talking about Skull and Bones here, it also seems very likely that this could be one of those kind of free to play experiences, given the amount of microtransactions, given the world building that you're talking about. It certainly seems possible, but you know, I think that this is EA, this is Ubisoft kind of diving into to see what else they can come up with, looking at kind of the long tails on the free to play market. I also wonder, given this language, I wonder what their sales numbers and success looks like for. Oh, help me out here, Swiss. What? Not Swiss. Tao. What's the battle royale from Ubisoft? The
Hyperscape.
Hyperscape, right? Because that's really been their most recent kind of free to play dive into things, other than things like Brawlhalla, where they picked up from another developer or kind of brought in house. So, but in this same news cycle here with Ubisoft, I keep saying another one. Okay, Ubisoft investing. There we go into free to play. We get the announcement from last week around the division that there will be not only a mobile division, uh, uh, the division game franchise, Tom Clancy's The Division franchise on mobile. There we go. I didn't want to say it's a mobile division, but and also that we will be getting a free to play uh, division game. Division Heartland, and that piece is, the kind of speculation around there is that it's one of the studios that had worked on some of the expansions for Division One, and those expansions include the survival mode that came there and some other things that might lend itself to a free to play multiplayer type of experience. So, thoughts on Ubisoft's kind of investing further into the free to play marketplace
Yeah,
or concerns?
I was kind of surprised at how. I know we got that article earlier in the year for Hyperscape saying they're trying to overhaul that game, just how it plays out, and trying to get people to stick around, basically, kind of that medium to long range goals for it. And I always thought it was doing well, I guess, because I always heard good things about it and read good things about it online. And then this article, how they're kind of saying too, how, like, you know, we're learning from what we did with Hyperscape. And once again, kind of sounding like it, like I was kind of downing it a little bit, but I don't know. It just seems interesting that I mean, I guess they have a lot of companies out there and developers. Excuse me. And maybe they can pull it off, but it seems like they'll be stretching themselves pretty thin here if they're trying to do these AAA titles plus these big open world, or well, I shouldn't say open world, big persistent games in at the same time or in conjunction. I don't know if they're going to try to release them in the same year or like every other year have one or the other, but it just seems like they're might be taking on a little bit more than they can chew in the long run.
So, I'm excited about this news too. And I guess I'll be the Ubisoft fanboy tonight. But even to swerve a little bit back to Sea of Thieves to Skull and Bones. One of the things that I always keep firmly in mind is this is the company that took Rainbow Six, and despite what a very large majority of the fan base said, which is that we were in love with the campaign, we were in love with the single player, we were in love with Terrorist Hunt, we despised the thought of a multiplayer only game, had a pretty weak launch, turned that game around into one of the top multiplayer franchises on the planet. Um, and so I think what I'm kind of reading in this news is they are, I, you know, I'm just using a theoretical model, splitting the difference, right? They're one of the most prolific publishers in the world, with regards to the number of AAA titles that they put out every year. This is one of those numbers are one of the reasons why I've thought about strongly about subscribing to Uplay or Ubisoft Connect or whatever the thing is now. Just because I'm like, wait a minute, how many Ubisoft titles do I buy each year? And okay, if I buy X number, then I've already paid for the subscription. Like, because it makes sense. And now what they're saying is, hey, instead of 8 AAA paid titles, we're going to put out 4 AAA paid titles and then make another, right, leverage. And the big difference here is Hyperscape was new IP. People didn't buy into it. And I think maybe even if they're looking a little bit at Apex, which Apex frustrates me a little because I'm like, that's barely Titanfall. Like, that is just, I mean, it's Titanfall in name pretty much only. It's not like it's the same. I look at that game and I'm like, that's like, there's nothing that harkens to Titanfall for me. But fine, I'll push the I believe button. But what they're talking about is taking tried and true franchises that they have a committed player base around, and they're saying, hey, look, this thing is already oriented around an open world and a battle rhythm of release of chapter oriented content. Why don't we just stop the whole AAA major release for $60 a pop and everything that involves, and just stand these teams up as a continuing development and deployment team? Because I don't think it's that huge of a shift from what they were doing. And I think, actually, from a development perspective, I think it takes some of that overhead down on the way there's the spool down and the spool back up, and potentially bringing in a new engine for each iterative release, and how the release has to feel different than like the original. Now it's just, again, I hate to say it, but it's yet another Destiny and Call of Duty like model, where it's just let's just maintain, right, and just build on top of it, and release incrementally. And I hate to say it, but capture that microtransaction money, right, as we send that ship down the road.
I understand the business reasoning. As a gamer, I hate it. Because, like, I mean, I talked about it last week, I think. I mean, you alluded to it, Augustus, what I am as a gamer and what I'm trying to, like, get out of this hobby, right? And, like, a lot of it is a sense of accomplishment and achievement. Tickling my thought process and my skills on the computer, all those things. When we have these just like like just these gaming services, I don't feel a sense of accomplishment. I don't feel a sense of achievement. It's always just like there's no end. It's I'm in a hamster wheel,
Are you
and I don't want to be in a hamster wheel of gaming.
are you sure that's true? And the reason I ask that is because, right, what you talked about last week, and I don't think it's unique to any of us, right, is how you're exploring other bounds, and you're looking at other things. And the thing that I think about, for instance, I've just recently been huge jumping back on the Destiny bandwagon, right, playing it across 4 platforms. And I think back and I realize, wait a second, and DBQ falls in this camp too. We've been playing Destiny for 7 years, and we have only, I would contend that, based on the opinions we've routed here, and we've onboarded you into that too, Swiss. And I know you came in, and you might be going out, but the point is that you came into that fold. And I go, hey, we've had our moments of, like, we've had our problems, right, with the uptake, and they wiped out some of our progress and took things away, and they've vaulted things, right? But the fact remains that we've played for 7 years. And so, Tal's been talking about this a little bit, and now, this year, I'm not load balancing whether or not I'm going to play 25 individual titles. Right now, I'm load balancing how many titles am I going to play because I got at least 4 games that I got to make some time investment in seasons on. So I don't know. Times they are changing, tides shifting. I don't know. I agree with you. I still want the mix, right? I still want the diversification. I still want those experiences in here.
Yeah.
But I just see a wedge of room being opened up for, you know, some seasonal titles that you keep coming back to. And that feeling of accomplishment, because I think there is a feeling of accomplishment. Like when I talk about that 7-year thing and I go, not true on every platform, but like I've got a Titan on PlayStation 5 now that I started right in OG Destiny, if I have my lineage, if I remember my lineage correctly.
No,
You didn't bring him over?
oh no,
I think you
could you bring him
I
over?
I think you could. I thought you could. I'll
Sort
go
of.
back and check.
I think it's sort of.
Yeah, I think so.
Some things you couldn't. I think it was like cosmetic stuff or something like that. Where you couldn't bring over for some reason or whatever.
I'll go back and check. But
Anyhow, I mean, I think the idea of progression there is true. I think I want to. I mean, I'm coming at it from a different angle than you, Swiss, which is part of the beauty of this podcast is that we can do that. For me, it's the investment in the world. As somebody who, enjoys Mass Effect, the books and the comics. Somebody who 2 weeks ago, when Ubisoft announced that they were investing in a variety of comics, novels related to Assassin's Creed, I like that. That's interesting. Give me more of the world to explore in a variety of media and a variety of game kind of genres, platforms, and economic models as well. Like, it's not so much that I need to, when you talk about the hamster wheel, it's not so much that I need to keep all those plates spinning, keep the Titanfall mobile free to play game and my Titanfall 2 character up and going. Although there was a moment of time, although those timings did not work out. Anyhow, but it's that idea of I can dip into that because it is a free to play game. Maybe I don't have a week to do this, or maybe the the bigger AAA game is the story robust base one, but maybe it's the Division Heartland is the one where I jump in with friends to play a quick match of something, right? I think in some ways it's what I see this as what you were talking about, game logic, in terms of it being a way to leverage their IPs, which is what they're messaging here. Whether or not they can do that successfully, will be interesting, or how long they can sustain that. But I think that they do have a number of IPs that they have built worlds around, at least within a game world, and this gives them it, I, I think it gives them the economic ability to see what can be sustainable within those different models. And I think it's okay if it's not for everyone, and it's probably going to turn off people in this process. I think that was right when this news first dropped. One of the big conversations online was, are they abandoning AAA, right? Or how are they not making the big game? And how, it seemed initially like it was a big shift. And even if it ends up being a shift, it may be a little more gradual, but I could see the financial stability of getting to that point.
So I have two thoughts here now that I was listening to you guys talking here. So, and you kind of mentioned this too, DB, just now with people fearing that they won't do AAA games, but they're probably gonna do AAA games. They'll do the Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Ghost Recon, those type of games. But does that mean they're not gonna do any more new IPs, or are they gonna just be few and far between? Because like when you guys are talking through this, I'm looking at the past games, and yeah, most of them have been fairly good. They had Wildlands, Ghost Recon the Wildlands. Before that, they had the other Ghost Recon series did fairly well, pretty well actually. But then they brought forward, and they came, you get Breakpoint, which obviously kind of stunk up the place. You have what we just talked about, Hyperscape, which I thought was doing good, but maybe not as well as they wanted it to. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe it is doing good, but not as well. And you have things like For Honor, which that's that's been okay too, and I think they've been trying to build on that one, and probably has gotten a lot better throughout the years. I think that was 2017, I think, from what I'm reading here.
Yeah, they really
When that
invested
came out.
in that. At some peaks, they had some showcases on their E3 shows around For Honor years after the fact. Yeah, it goes back to that they'll stick with a number of franchises like Game was talking about in terms of Rainbow Six.
Yeah.
Well,
So go ahead.
And I think, and I'm speculating and guessing, I think what they're going to do is they're going to take their strongest performing franchises that have performed well around the singular releases. So I expect that we'll continue to get an Assassin's Creed. We'll continue to get Far Cry, and a couple of others. But what I think is that these titles that have been struggling, like you mentioned, Ghost Recon, I readily expect Ghost Recon to go this route of AAA IP that converts to some type of free to play continuing model because it's like perfect for it, right? I mean, it's loot, it's guns, it's gear, and it's struggled in its single player instantiation. I suspect Watchdog Legions, and I suspect I'm sorry, so I suspect Ghost Recon. I expect Watchdogs as well, because those titles have just struggled either critically or financially, one or the other, to where they've just never measured up to a Ghost of Tsushima, or even, I can't believe I'm saying this, or even like the zeitgeist of a Days Gone. Say what you will about Days Gone, but it occupied headlines, and there was apparently a groundswell behind it as well. So, and then the last thing I'll say is, again, Swiss, there's a part of me that agrees with you, and again, I don't want those experiences to go away. But I've found enjoyment in having the flexibility to say, let me play Destiny 2 this season, let me play Call of Duty next season, right? And not having to have a fear of, whereas so many times I make that investment in a $60 single player experience, and yes, there are the Ghosts of Tsushima or the things that you spend the 80 hours in, but there's like there's a road of death behind me of like titles that like I dipped my toe in, right, and they just didn't stick with me long enough to come back to. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I do want to say, like, I'm not sitting here criticizing Ubisoft to the point where it's like, how could you do this to us as gamers? It's not that. Like, I get it. It's just that's not my scene, and I'm probably not going to partake. But yeah, I'm like obviously the guy that's resistant to subscription based anything. So
Well, you won't have time because you'll be playing Call of Duty Black Ops with us.
see,
Exactly.
and so, but here's the thing about that, like, that for me is like a social thing. Like, you guys are all playing it, and I'm viewing that as like, okay, the competition will be fun. There's not a heavy investment in, I got to play this season to grind for this or whatever. Like, to me, it's just like I think DB's used the analogy a lot of a pickup game of basketball with my friends. So from that perspective, but the way that like they're talking about Skull and Bones and all this stuff, it's like changing story and dynamic, and it's just like, I don't want to have to tune in every week, every season to keep up with it. Like, I don't want it to feel like a job to grind. And I guess that's where I kind of draw the line between those types of experiences. But
And I think that's fair too, right? From somebody who struggles with like how many times do I have to Google a thing to figure out how to do this quest in Destiny 2? Like, and that's why my relationship with Destiny 2 is very often new season. Let me play the chapter-oriented, like adventure, like campaignish kind of content, and then like beyond that, I could care less, right? Like I'm not gonna find out like flipping lost sector I need to go into this time to accomplish what goofy wackadoodle task to find the Wither Horde just so they can vault it 2 seasons from now, right? Sorry, a little bitter.
No, you don't say.
That was a great gun.
But Swiss, I just want to say, like, there's nothing wrong with that perspective, right? Like, you can enjoy games from a narrative, artistic point of view, and there can still be space for games within the kind of recreational sport aspect
right.
of that, right? Like, it's you can enjoy literature from a standalone novel to a 40-year running comic book, and your level of investment will definitely be very different between the two.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with you guys. So I think that's why E2KG is a little bit different from the torches and pitchforks of the internet. It's because hey, I don't like this, but it's cool. It's not going to be my thing, but
Right. So speaking of sports, DB.
You are right there with transitions. Thank you, sir. So speaking of sports, as I'm clicking my snapping my fingers, so I did not break a pinky playing, but we do have a news story here, Tao, about an MLB baseball player who broke their pinky playing some video games. But that's not the only baseball story we have. So Tao, take us home tonight.
Yeah, so a couple of quick little fun articles here. So the first one, Jesus Lazardo from the Oakland Athletics, the A's. He evidently he was playing a video game. And they don't tell you what it is in the article, unfortunately. But he bumped, as they put it in quotes, his hand on a desk, which evidently gave him a fracture on one of his on his pinky finger. So that's quite a bump, as I mentioned in the chat there. So Bob Melvin, the manager of the A's, was talking about this and how didn't know about this until after the game. He actually did it right before the game. He was playing whatever game and he bumped his hand and broke his finger. But he was complaining of soreness. The people checked it out and they kind of agreed, like, yeah, he could play. So he played, and he gave up 6 runs in 3 innings. So yeah, he probably had some issues there. So, but I thought it was just kind of funny that this guy is playing video games. I kind of wish they would say what he was playing. Like, was it a VR game, or was he playing the Wii or something? Like, I don't know what he was doing that he bumped his hand in the first place. But
I think you
I
can
just
bump your hand by really aggressively putting your fist down into a table.
yeah,
Let's say when you die in a multiplayer match is also
Yeah.
very possible.
maybe
Such
he
a,
rage quit or something.
yeah. My speculation was this is definitely rage quitting Call of Duty.
Yeah, he probably doesn't want to be playing like Wii Sports or something. He don't play baseball before he plays baseball for real. So he's probably playing something else. But yeah, so there's that. And then, hey, our friends at EA, they actually picked up the studio, and now I can't. Excuse me, not
Metalhead
Meathead,
Studio.
Metalhead Software out of Victoria, British Columbia. The makers of Super Mega Baseball, and they just released the latest one in March 2020. It looks like. Excuse me. Some more of a not so much. Well, they say it's kind of a simulation game, according to them, but just the characters and kind of the look of it. It's a little bit more cartoony and kind of more playful, and you even say in the article that you can if you want to just go and hit and pitch, and you can do that, but you can get a little bit more nuanced into the game and make it an actual simulation, and probably not as in deep or in depth as MLB the Show, but I've never played any. Have you guys played any of the Super Mega? Is it? I mean, can you get like?
Yeah,
Is
you
it
can really
fairly?
customize it down. I mean,
Yeah.
you're always in that kind of, graphical style. I played the first one when it came out on PlayStation 3, and it reminds me of like the Wii era, PlayStation 2 era, um, MLB Pros, or the kind of the cutesy. This was number of these kind of big heads or disproportionate people, and the third one is a little more realistic in the proportion sizes, but they've kind of been stretching their characters over time. But there's lots of customization, and so you can really make it may not be graphically a simulation, but in terms of the degrees that you can tweak your settings and your pitches and the dynamic difficulty, that you can have everything kind of on a gradation scale in terms of, I can't really pitch very well, or I can't hit outside in the corners or field, and you can really kind of tune it that way to match a play style that you want. So it's fun. It's pretty approachable.
Does
And
it?
I think in some ways it's going to be really interesting to see if EA uses this as a segue back into the baseball market after announcing that they're back into golf games as well.
Yeah.
Well, and they
Yeah.
mentioned they mentioned they're on a growth strategy for sports games, and
Yeah.
they mentioned being able to potentially leverage Metalhead's engine and their stylistic approach to other franchises. DBQ, does this remind you of anything?
I feel like I should know this answer, but
I don't think you do.
The
Not
thing that
right now.
excites me about this is it's a potential ramp way back to EA
the
Sports
bigs.
Big.
Oh
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
I could just see that engine, right? That style being used for something like like NFL Street, right? Or I mean, not just bigs, but yeah, NFL Street, NBA Street, all of the different big sports titles, right? The 3-on-3 soccer game, which those games were just so much more accessible and so much more kind of exciting to a certain extent. It was a way to, and unfortunately, those games would play perfectly on something like the Nintendo Switch. But it was such a great kickback on my PlayStation Portable, kicking back and relaxing on my couch, right, and just not having to like Madden. There's a certain mental lift to that. Like if you really dig deep into like the coaching aspect, and like those big sports titles were just so great to just like, hey, I'm as a kid who played football in the street, in the concrete street, right? It was just a harkening back like to that childhood, and it's an exciting notion if they go down that path.
Good catch there, Tao, on the street, right? It was FIFA Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that this is potentially really exciting in terms of the diversification of sports titles. I love the fact that sports titles don't have to be complete simulations. I'll be interested to see what 2K does with the NFL license that they have for non-simulation football. The fact that we're getting a dodgeball game from EA is in this coming month here, is fun. It's fun to take, going back to what Swiss was talking about. Like sometimes I do just want to pick up and play a, a game, pick up and play a game, not necessarily have a narrative experience too.
And that was the greatest thing about those big. Right? It removed the veneer of having to play an 82 game season, or or a 20, even a 20, 16 game, 20 game, whatever the NFL season format is now, right? Season of NFL, and just like pick up and play. By the way, Meathead is not a development studio, but it is an asymmetric horror game being developed by a studio at THQ Nordic, which is supposed to be out in 2 years. So close, but no cigar there, as we talked about
Deep dive there.
stogies earlier. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
gentlemen. And go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I was just say, just expand on I guess, Cleese, what he was saying about them bolstering their sports portfolio. Like he mentioned, I think he mentioned that they bought Codemasters, and then they also bought a mobile game publisher, Glue Mobile, GLU, Glue Mobile, which makes like a MLB. Now I got the DBQ stutters there. MLB Tap Sports Baseball on mobile devices, along with Design Home and Covette Fashion. Okay, so yep, but they're getting back in the
That's right.
baseball game.
Glue. See, I can't say it either. Glue Mobile also does the tech. Yeah, I know what you're
Have you
talking
played
about
that
now.
one?
Yes, I have. Tried it, uninstalled it, played it for a week, one opening baseball season, because I wanted to experience more baseball. So, going back to that Ubisoft model of diving into an experience, I downloaded it because I had some free time at work that I wanted to play some baseball in. And the Topps baseball card game was not enough for me. So, anyhow, any other thoughts, gentlemen, on this new story on EA back in and expanding in the sports market, or any other thoughts from our previous stories about Ubisoft and Nintendo? Thank you, guys. This is a great discussion. Again, excellent discussion. I love that we can disagree with each other. Swiss, I completely agree with your point that this is what makes Enough to Keep Going special, that we can have a civilized conversation, sometimes a fun, kind of rib poking, snarky conversation, and as the same, but all in jest and in good humor, because we enjoy each other's presence and our perspectives and appreciate what each of us contribute to this larger discussion. So thank you so much, gentlemen. Before we head out, this is our deep dive episode, as we said at the top of the show. But next week, we'll be coming into the Pixplays, into our assignments, into our playlist show as well, our GX show. So this next week, we've got our show around, not only what we've been playing, but our nice assignment here. Our assignment here ties in very nicely with what our existing conversation has been tonight, that about EA. See, I did it again all night long. I'm doing the EA Ubisoft mix-up about Ubi diving, keeping their feet in the water around AAA games, but making sure that they're sampling and investing more into the free-to-play market as well. So what our assignment here is to go back to an Ubisoft franchise, and maybe something that has not performed so well, maybe something, and in Tao's case, that he thought performed well, like Hyperscape. Um, maybe it's something as Game Logic was talking about here, like Ghost Recon, or that could be diving into the free to play aspects. So take some time in your back catalog of Ubisoft games, because we all probably have something here, whether it's an Assassin's Creed or some indie game, or a Rabbids game, or a Rayman game that we have sitting in a PlayStation Plus, or Xbox Live backlog somewhere. Let's take a moment here to dive back in and see what we could play within that backlog. So that is what our assignment is for next week, gentlemen. And so for myself, DBQ Hams, Game Logic, Towmaster, and Swisscar, thank you guys for joining us tonight, tomorrow, whenever you're listening and watching. Hope that you've enjoyed this conversation just as much as we have. And until we see you again, until we talk again, play the games you love those you play with, and take care of each other. Good night, everybody.